Hey, everybody, and welcome to episode number 31 of Boutique Talk. My name is Jake Boston, otherwise known as Steelbook Obsessed on all your major social media platforms. And if you want to listen to all things physical media related, then you've come to the right place. Every week, I have on a new guest to talk about their physical media journey. And tonight, my guest has acquired numerous movies for home media release for multiple companies, including Wild Eye Releasing, Vinegar Syndrome, and is now gathering a great lineup for TerrorVision. It's my pleasure to have Brad Henderson on the podcast. How's it going, Brad?
Hello, how are you? Thanks for having me.
No, thanks for coming on. I've had a couple people within the industry, but I'm always trying to get as many as I can because I love hearing the stories of what you've had to do to kind of get into the business and how you've kind of expanded within it. So
Yeah. It's been a very, very long journey. So
we talked a little bit before we started recording, but how long do you think it's been since you've actually started doing this?
yeah, I mean, I would say at least almost 9 years now.
Yeah.
If not a little longer. I mean, I originally wanted to start my own label like probably about 10 or 11 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I priced it all out and it was just an absorbent amount of money. And not knowing if you're going to have a return on it because most of the movies that I wanted to release weren't things that people were asking for, which is kind of my MO from working at multiple labels is, growing up in a video store and consuming everything I could see, I was turned on to so many different types of films. And during the mom and pop video store boom, there was just so many video stores that were around. Within like even my home, I had like 4 or 5 mom and pop places, and they all kind of like dealt with different styles of like how the store was set up to what they actually curated or brought in. There's obviously certain stores that were more horror focused, and then those types of things. And then when we would spend summers in Ohio, which where I was born, in the Canton, Akron area, Mass, stuff like that, there was this video store chain called Video Time. And when we would spend summers, it would be like 4 or 5 weeks there. And I would just go to the video store like every 3 days because I would just rent movies while my parents went. They were big gamblers, so they would meet up with like my aunt and like uncles and stuff, and they would go gambling, and I would spend like the night with my grandma multiple times, and we would just watch movies together. She was a big movie buff too, so like, and I didn't really have any restrictions on my family. My family kind of let me watch whatever, so I never had like, oh, you can't see this, you can't see that. My parents were always open. And plus, it was just a wide variety. My great grandma loved musicals. She liked watching movies. My dad liked Westerns and prison films. My mom loved horror films. My grandmother loved dramas and like thrillers. So I would watch movies with them. So it's just like, there was nothing off the table for me. Like I just kind of watched everything. I mean, obviously gravitated towards horror the most.
Yeah.
But, musicals is like a love of mine and things like that. And I grew up on like these nitty gritty video stores that carried everything, stuff that's very underseen and still unavailable, and people that just haven't seen it.
Right.
So yeah, that's where my kind of love goes. I love all these other popular movies that people love, but they're always going to find a home somewhere.
Sure.
Top Gun's never going to just be out of print and not available. But all these smaller films, though they will do. I mean, we've lost so many films through the years as it is, and it's just getting worse as time progresses.
So I went to the movie rental store a lot as a kid as well. Every week, every Friday, my dad would come home with just like 4 or 5 tapes, and that's what we would do for the weekend. Bring home a pizza or something. It was the best.
Yeah.
Do you have a specific movie that you remember discovering at the movie store that still doesn't really get talked about a lot today?
Yeah, I mean, I could probably go on forever, but I think one thing that I wouldn't say it was a good experience. I definitely remember the movie, but when I was younger, I rented this movie called Midnight Intruders, and it was a Gary Graver film, which I didn't know that at the time because I was like probably 10 or 11 when I saw it.
Mhm.
But it had this, dude with a mask. It was in the horror section, and it had this dude with a mask coming up through this window, like with a ladder, knife in his hand. Oh, that looks cool. It looks like a serial killer movie or
Right.
something, you know. And I rented it, and it's not. It's a very like rapey softcore movie.
Yeah.
So I was like watching it, and I was just like, "What is this?"
Hmm.
I was very. I vividly remember everything, and I actually rewatched it a few years ago because I was like, "I'm gonna watch that again," because it was, I know much more about Gary Graver now, and I actually enjoyed it. But it was like seeing it when I was younger. It just like not traumatized me. I was just like, "What the fuck is this?" Like,
Hmm.
I didn't know movies like that really existed.
Sure.
Um, so yeah, but in a way, it kind of put me through another realm of discovering other titles like that and other movies, and then started watching like vintage pornography when I was in my teens, and then got into that. So like that's a whole not like again, nothing was really off the table. I enjoyed
Hmm.
quite a bit and still do. So.
I was gonna say teenagers. That's a good time to start watching that stuff. I think. Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, I mean, my parents had it in their home, and so like I was watching all these things, and sometimes you didn't know you were watching one until like 20 minutes in because there's only like 3 or 4 sex scenes in those things, and
Mhm.
there's
Then the
like an
music
hour
hits.
part of story. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like so yeah, it was like I was enjoying that stuff at a young age and got more into it as I got older. So.
Mhm. Do you
Uh,
think going to the movie store and just finding all of these movies you've never heard of before, do you think that's part of the reason why you started acquiring movies in the first place? Is just trying to go for the thrill of the hunt, find something that not a lot of people have seen, and try to give that sucker a nice spotlight and a nice physical media release?
Yeah, I mean, growing up and being at the video store every week, like
Hmm.
literally, like no joke, and watching stuff. And again, my mom would let me watch anything at a very young age. I've posted videos of myself when I think it was like October of '88. I think the videos are dated, and I would have been 3 going on 4, and I have like the Freddy mask and the glove, and I'm doing like the little nursery rhyme that they sing.
Hmm.
So my mom put me in front of that stuff at that young of age,
Yeah, that
and I just
merchandise
tried to.
was everywhere too back in the day.
Yeah, I know. It was like I think she bought it at like Kmart or something.
Uh huh.
But yeah, it's like I just consumed as much as I could, and I really loved movies, and I identified movies pretty quickly. Like I knew I was watching something that was made by people. Like I didn't know how, but I did know that I was watching movies, and so I wanted to watch more and more. And as I got older, like in my even I say that, but I was like 10 or 11.
Hmm.
I was consuming any type of media I could.
Yeah.
Watching like my mom would just say, "Let's watch a movie," and I would get like really, really excited because I want to see something. And then yeah, watch trying to rent every movie that I could, and then I had back in the day before IMDb. There were just these like CD-ROM discs called All Movie Guide,
Mm.
and I picked up All Movie Guide 2, and it worked like IMDb. It had, the description of the movies, and then it had hyperlinks so you could click on a director and see their filmography.
Okay.
And so, like, I printed those out. And my mom got so mad at me because I would just spend, and she saw these like booklets that were like super thick,
Hmm.
thousands of pages, like, and I was just like writing in my notes and like writing if I liked it or not, and trying to find all these movies, like mainly going to like the horror genre and like trying to find out if I could see all these movies.
Wow.
Um, and yeah, I would just like, again, go to the video stores, see anything I could rent. And then when I was in my kind of mid teens, probably like 15, 16 years old, there were some like tape trading conventions here, like in Florida, like in Tampa and Orlando, and it would be, basically bootlegs of movies that were incredibly hard to find, foreign films, whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
I talked my mom into taking me to these things, and I wouldn't trade any tapes. I would just had money with me, and I would buy,
Doesn't look like you get rid of much of anything behind you. The way
well,
it
yeah,
looks.
I mean, yeah, I didn't get rid of anything, but
Good.
I wanted more. So like I had, you would go and, somebody would be like, what do you have? And they're like, oh, these tapes here, these are some German, gore films, no
Mm-hmm.
subtitles, no nothing. And you'd be like, all right. And it's like $5 per movie or something. And you'd get it home. There'd be no subtitles. And you would watch this like German gore film and you have no idea like what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I was watching movies like that, going to like tape trading conventions, and like there was a few places online where like forums and blogs before everything got so weird, where people in the community, and I made friends with numerous people like Ant Tipson. I would talk to. He was arrested at one point, like for distributing movies, like R-rated movies.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, just like things like that would occur, and I would come across like all these people, and yeah, it was a weird time because I was trying to consume as much media as I could, and like just getting into it. And to answer your question, yeah, I mean, going to the video store was kind of my intro to learning about movies and wanting more, and the knowledge that I had and have gained is that, obsessing over it helped me later on, and there's just so many movies that people just don't know about because they've been gone, never off of VHS. But even when they were on VHS, they were scarce, because sometimes, a distributor, they would distribute their own movie locally. It wouldn't make it to other states. So sometimes you had your local filmmakers, like in Ohio, Videotime had their movies because that's how certain people distributed things. The same thing with like in Florida. So like depending on regional where you were, you may have had movies available to you that were never available anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like how I discovered like J.R. Bookwalter and like Tempe Entertainment, because he was from Akron. And so in the Videotime section, in their horror section, they had a space dedicated to that director. No one knew who he was, but he was local. So, Dead Next Door, Robot Ninja, all those movies, like even his Tempe Entertainment movies that he acquired because he started his own distribution, those were there. And so I thought that was really cool, going to Ohio and seeing those movies there and being able to rent them, and that person's local. That was like a huge thing. So yeah, it's just like doing that for so long and trying to get my hands on any media, buying beta tapes, laser discs, like all this stuff when I was younger. And my parents kind of embraced it. They were big on any type of new format. So we had a
That's
CED
nice.
player. We didn't have many CEDs because they were super, complicated to like they were really heavy. And it was a format that I think even people knew it wasn't going to last. So yeah, CEDs, we had laser discs, beta player. Even my mom, our very first DVD player, if people like have been buying movies this long, original DVD players were like $1,200-$1,500 when they first came out. And my mom bought one for like $1,200, I remember. And, we bought like one movie and it was like $40,
It's crazy.
So,
right.
Yeah, it was like $40 on DVD. Like all DVDs were $40-$50 when they first hit. I remember going to Best Buy and like looking at the section and like, what the fuck? And then, like a year later, they were affordable.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of like a brief history of like my life and knowing about these movies, I guess you could say.
Sure. I lived in growing up, I lived in the middle of the boonies in Iowa, and we had like one rental store that had a good selection of movies. It would have been nice to have a lot more rental stores around me, but I didn't know anybody with a CED player or laser disc. It was always just VHS until DVD came out. So like when I collect a lot of physical media as well. I have the CEDs, laser discs, and it's crazy how much those suckers cost when they originally came out.
Yeah, yeah, they were.
These
I
just
remember.
$80 ish, like 70, $80. That's crazy.
Yeah, yeah. My mom bought me, I think, Escape from New York on Laserdisc because I discovered that there were commentaries and people talking on
Hmm.
them, and so there's a really great commentary with Carpenter and Russell on New York, and that honestly, listening to that commentary on that Laserdisc kind of changed my like entire life
Hmm.
because I enjoyed it, but also like I learned like these two dudes were friends and made this movie together. And yeah, and then I got really into the idea of extras being on
Oh yeah.
discs. That was like a big thing for me. So when
Hmm.
DVDs started doing it, I was really excited because laser discs were so expensive, 80, $100 per title,
Right.
especially Criterion and stuff, you know. Um, so yeah, when DVDs came out and they were affordable, it was really nice. Even like when they had like biography and you could click in and you'd have to like click through someone's biography and
Hmm.
just read about them, you know, that was cool. And then, you
Yep.
know, interviews and commentaries and stuff, especially the Anchor Bay days with those DVDs, that was a huge deal.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I got really into kind of the DVD idea and, you know, upgrading stuff because things look better, you know, especially on our televisions at the time.
Hmm.
You know, with the revolution, and I was able to save so much space. But it was weird because, like, you know, I downsized so much because all these popular movies came out, so I could get rid of my Ghostbusters VHS and Jurassic Park and all of that.
Hmm.
But I wasn't able to get rid of other stuff. And, you know, through the years, that changed a little bit. And then when Blu-ray came out, you know, that kind of changed, and there was some companies that focused on, you know, some more gritty things. And yeah, it was always cool to see the life of physical media kind of change the availability of things, you know, in films. So
Agreed. The collection you got behind you, it looks magnificent, by the way. Do you have a specific format you like to collect for, or is it just kind of all over the board, whatever you see and you like, you grab?
yeah, I mean, I always say this, that I don't ever, and this isn't like a like shade at anybody. I just never considered it collecting because collecting I feel is something like stamps that you put in a book and then you leave alone.
Hmm.
Like yeah, anything that I wanted to buy, I would buy and then immediately open and watch.
Sure.
You know, I try. I mean, there's some stuff sealed behind me because it's mainly like if something comes out, I've probably seen it like a few times,
Hmm.
like, and I won't open it until I show it to somebody else or that time comes for me to rewatch it. Um, but yeah, I would just at that point in Blu-rays, especially that, you know, time frame of those things coming out, companies like, you know, Vinegar Syndrome and Arrow and Code Red and Scorpion releasing, like they were releasing a lot of like cool horror films and genre films and exploitation stuff that I grew up on at the video
Hmm.
store, especially Code Red. Even on DVD, they were doing that. But their Blu-ray selection was insane. So you know, sometimes I would pick up stuff that I haven't seen before, or I remembered the box art, but I never picked it up, or you know, it's just something I skipped over, or I was like, that doesn't look like it would interest me. But as an adult now, I was like, oh shit, I sat on this movie for fucking 20 years. You know, like I just
Right.
watched this movie the other day that Code Red put out called Terror Squad, and I saw like that cover at VHS at like every fucking video store I went to.
Hmm.
But then I watched it probably like last month and it blew me away. I was like,
Hmm.
holy shit, how are not more people talking about this movie? Like
Hmm.
I skipped this for like 30 years. That's crazy. So yeah, you're always kind of discovering new things, and I still to this day try to watch more movies a year that I haven't seen rather than rewatching stuff.
Yeah.
Hence why I don't really open a lot of my movies sometimes, because I want to watch something else
Yep.
that's stuck in a VHS state or something.
Sure.
Maybe that could be my new favorite movie, and I try to acquire it and release it. So.
Correct. I'm the same way as well. I hardly ever rewatch a movie, even though I own a bunch of them. It's just like part of the reason why I like collecting is to kind of get back to that movie rental days and just like grab a title that looks interesting to me off my shelf that I haven't seen before
Yeah.
and hope I get blown away. It's always a gamble, but that feeling of seeing a movie that you've never seen before and falling in love with it, there's like not many other feelings that are better than that.
Yeah, and I rewatch a lot if you look at my letterbox, but it's mainly like some days like are just straight up like computer like emails and catching up on stuff and doing
Mhm.
spreadsheets. So I'll put on a movie I've seen like 100
Sure.
times,
Hmm.
so I can literally watch, because like I never watch a movie that I haven't seen if I got a computer screen or a phone. I always try to give a movie a fair chance with all that stuff put away. But when you're working and you want something in the background, I put on, like today I put on Bebe's Kids when I was writing emails. I've seen Bebe's Kids probably like 100 times in my life.
Hmm.
One of my favorite like animated movies. And that's how I rewatch stuff,
Sure.
you know. And then at night I usually put on something I haven't seen before.
Hmm.
Or I haven't seen in a long, long time as I was a kid. Because, like, in my mind, I have a pretty good memory. So I'm like, oh, I watched that years ago. But then I like calculate and I'm like, oh shit, that was like 25 years ago. I haven't seen this for 25 years.
Right.
I think it's fair to give that another
Yeah.
rewatch, because my memory is good, but it's not to the detail of,
Mhm.
of what happened in the movie, scene by scene. So
I just rewatched E.T. for the first time in 25 years with my kids because they were about the same age that I was when I saw it for the first time. And yeah, it's just as good in my opinion. And one kid was old enough to really enjoy it. The other one was a little bit too young and got scared of E.T. all the time. So
Mhm.
in that way, it's kind of nice to like go back to some of those movies and just kind of see it through your lens 20 years later and just your kids and just see how they kind of react to
Yeah.
it.
That's funny. I have a similar story at ET. It was a movie that I watched pretty consistently when I
Yeah.
was younger. Watched it a lot, like too
Mhm.
much, and I didn't watch it for years and years. And when they redid the movie and they took out like the guns and they put
The
walkie
walkie
talkies,
talkies.
and then
Yeah.
ET's eyes, they gave it animation where he would
Mhm.
like they would circle around. I just was like, I don't want to watch that, so I never bothered with it. And then the UHD came out, and uh, it was Christmas, like Christmas night, and we always watch like a couple movies in Christmas. And it's like, let's watch ET.
Mhm.
I was like, love this movie, and I realized, just like you, I was like, fuck, man, I probably haven't seen this in like almost 30 years,
Yep.
and I cried like a fucking baby. I was
It's
like,
so
"Oh
good.
my god, this movie's absolutely still perfect."
Yep.
When I was like afraid, like, because sometimes I'll watch stuff, like I rewatched Flight of the Navigator, and I was like,
Yeah.
like that's not as what I thought it was
I
when I
liked
was.
watching it through my child lens a little bit better.
Yeah, that's
Uh-huh.
like, the same thing. It was like, we change as people, because if we didn't, I always make the joke that I would still think Three Ninjas is like the best movie ever made, and
It's still pretty good. Yeah.
I mean, I still love it. I'll put it on, but it's like, oh man, this movie's fucking like goofy as shit.
Right.
Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, it's one of those things where I do give things a shot. I'll or sometimes like I've seen like ET. I've seen the movie so many times that it's fresh in my head. But again, I realize I haven't seen it for like 20 years or something. So
Mhm. Right. Well, you kind of talk. I haven't looked at your letterbox review for ET, but I did see Bebe's Kids. I went on there. I noticed that you had an account. How long have you had a letterbox account, and how strict are you on your rating scale? Because there's everybody's different when it comes to that.
Yeah, well, I have technically two letterboxed accounts. One is inactive because somehow I got closed out.
Hmm.
So like none of that stuff. I think my one now I've had um I think since like 20, maybe 20 like 15.
Okay.
like I had. And yeah, people always give me shit about my ratings, but like I always have even arguments with friends. It's like, what do you rate Jaws? And I'm like, 5 stars, perfect movie. And they're like, what about this awful shot on video movie you like? I'm like, 5 stars.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you think that's as good as Jaws? And I'm like, no, but it's still a 5 star movie in its own
Right.
right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so yeah, I give out like I give out like 2.5, 3, 4, 5 stars like candy.
Sure.
It takes a lot for me to give something like a 1 or a 2 star.
Agreed.
And sometimes people will look at my 1 and 2 stars and they'll be like, "You didn't like this movie?" And I'm like, "Not really.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I didn't really care for Evil Dead 2. I'm sorry. I like Evil
Oof.
Dead.
Yeah.
I just don't like Evil Dead 2, which I know is like blasphemy for most people.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just like I don't really enjoy it. I'm sorry. I you can like it. I think it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if we all like the same thing, it'd be really, really boring.
Correct.
But yeah, like I mean, and again, a lot of newer movies probably get the lowest ratings because I think people just should know better now.
Mm-hmm.
And the sincerity behind making like bad movies, like when people were making those movies in the '70s, no one set out to make a bad movie. And
Right.
now it's kind of like a thing where people are like, "Oh, let's really like beef this up or ham it up," and it's like it doesn't work because that's not what these people were doing back in the '80s. They weren't like, "Oh, let's make something where it's really goofy and people will laugh at."
Mm-hmm.
No, they literally thought that was good drama or something, and now we just laugh at it and like this is fucking ridiculous.
Right.
So.
I've never been a fan of like the so bad it's good genre. That's just never been my thing. Whether
Yeah, I don't believe it. You either like a movie or you don't, one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, people always like, "Oh, do you like Mystery Science?" I've never watched Mystery Science Theater because they were always making fun of movies that I enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just rather watch the movie than hear people talk. I
Talk
don't
over it,
mind
yeah.
watching stuff with a crowd and some friends and like having a good time,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't need someone to make fun of a movie for me. I can laugh at the movie myself.
Yeah, I'm that way as well. I never listen to a commentary while I'm watching a movie. I would rather just watch the movie if I'm going to put it in. I think on my hand I can count the amount of times I've watched commentaries, but I'm more of like a Joe Bob Briggs kind of guy. Like I'll watch the movie and then you can kind of like break it apart and enter in like 5-10 minutes of somebody talking about it. I'd much rather have that type of style.
Yeah. I watched a lot of before it was even Monster Vision with Joe Bob, and then I watched Monster Vision when it was on USA, and then watched Rhonda Shear Up All Night and all that stuff. And yeah, I mean, any of those hosts. We had one here in Florida called the Grave Master that had his own program. It was very, very short lived. But I mean, I think a lot of people kind of had their own horror host, like in their communities and states, counties, I guess. But yeah, Joe Bob was a big inspiration during that time of watching Monster Vision. I would never miss an episode.
Sure.
Had most of my episodes like taped too.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I watched a lot. I gained a lot of knowledge because he was, would give details on the movies and all that type of thing. So
sure. Okay, so we kind of have a little bit of history, how you got started collecting. That's how your love of movie started. What made you want to start getting into helping make physical media?
Well, there was a few films that I really loved, and when the DVD boom was happening and then Blu-ray was coming out, I started reading more about like restoration and getting the films out and what it takes. And I was like, well, that's something I would be very interested in because I've always kind of been a curator of what, whether like I've worked at film festivals and I've done a bunch of like, and I host a quarterly like marathon that I've done for like over 10 years here with friends where I'll program like a day of movies. So I love doing that. And I love living vicariously through people watching something for the first time. Because the biggest crime that there is you can't watch a movie for the first time again. Like I hate that, but you can if you have like kids or friends and you watch DT. It's like you're watching it for the first time because you're watching it with them. So that was always awesome, especially when my daughter was younger. And yeah, I wanted to eventually got to do it, but I wanted to release The Severed Arm, because it was like one of my favorite movies of all time. And so I was like, how can I figure this out? And I was like, I actually found like some quotes and stuff. This is, probably, I would say maybe like 2012, somewhere around there. And I was like, okay, this much to manufacture. And before I got into it, I was like, this is like $20,000, $30,000. There's no fucking way I can do that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm in college. My wife's in college. We're trying to, pay for stuff. Like I just don't have that capital to do that. So it was like,
Yeah.
okay, like that's fine. This is like a dream that I can't really, fulfill. And then, yeah, it was probably like maybe 2013, 2014. Can't remember the exact date. I was on Amazon looking for movies, and I came across the Blu-ray for um, um, Night Train to Terror,
Oh yeah.
and it's like, holy shit, I love that movie. Like, who? This has got to be a bootleg. Like,
Mm-hmm.
who's putting out Night Train to Terror on Blu-ray? And on Amazon, you could see the person. I said, Vinegar Syndrome. So I went to their website, looked them up, and then they only had a few movies out at the time, but I like everything, like even some of their hardcore titles. I was like, oh my god, I've actually seen that. So I reached out to whoever it was, and it ended up being James Nurath at Vinegar Syndrome. I said, hey man, like I really love what you guys are doing. Like this is the stuff I grew up on. Like congrats. I write I write reviews on home video. This is before, all these podcasts and like
Sure.
all these reviews. Like no one was doing that at the time.
Right.
And I was like, I love talking about like restoration, transfer, blah, 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 the movie itself. And so he's like, yeah, he's like, let me, send you, I'll send you some stuff when we put it out. Like, so I just was on like a mailing list getting their stuff and reviewing it. And then Exploitation TV started, their streaming service, and they were like, hey, can you be a beta tester on this? Can you just like, it's private, can you go on there, just watch movies, tell us how it works, how it operates? And so like I went on, and I logged in, watched some movies, but they had 2 movies on there, and there was movies on there that they didn't own the rights to yet, but it wasn't like piracy. It was private. No one could see it unless you had the code, and they put some films on there because they already had them scanned and they were just testing things out. So there's 2 movies on there. One was The Severed Arm, and one was House of the Dead. And both of those movies I really, really loved as a kid, still do. And I just said, hey, are you guys releasing The Severed Arm or House of the Dead? And he's like, we're not releasing The Severed Arm, but we will be releasing House of the Dead. And I was like, I'll do anything to help out with that disc because I absolutely like adore that movie. It's like one of my favorite movies of all time.
Right.
And he was like, all right, let's just see. So like, I was like, I know the director, I know the producer. And so I put him in touch with those people. So there's interviews on that disc that I helped set up. I don't think I got credit for it if you can look at it, but those were like my first 2 like things I helped set up as Vinegar Syndrome was building behind the scenes. And then the whole idea was like The Severed Arm is supposed to be public domain, but no one really knows, so we're not going to do it. And I was like, well, I'd love to try to figure that out. And so I just like kept poking, saying like, I've been looking into doing this. I kind of know what I'm doing. Like, I've wanted to do this for a long time. And so they were just like, well, sure, if you know the rights and where material is for movies, let us know. And I was like, okay. And so like a week later, I wrote to him and I said, okay, here's 5 movies I found the rights to and have material for. And they were like, oh, okay. Like, we didn't know it would be that quick. And let's have a further conversation. And the stuff was like The Suckling, Splatter University, Flesh Eating Mothers, LA Wars. Those were some films that I brought to them early on. And and eventually like it got to, hey, can you help us find this person? Can you help us find this person? Because a lot of times like I would do like my own, like I had like this blog that I wrote and did interviews with like directors and stars, and I would reach out to them. So I actually
Hmm.
had like kind of a laundry list of talent of people that weren't popular that I tracked down, like through, calling them,
Hmm.
finding their like names like online. And, this is before like Facebook and MySpace and all that stuff. So I had like a lot of contacts, and they were just asking me like, "Hey, can you find this out? Can you find that out?" And I also have like a large collection of like work prints and stuff like that. So there was a movie that they were releasing called The Undertaker, and they were like, the movie's incomplete. The negatives cut. We have no idea where that footage is. And so they said, "Hey, can you help us find this?" And I did, and it ended up on the disc of, the VHS inserts of this work print that exists. Well, it's not really a work print; it was just a cut of the movie.
Hmm.
But yeah, I found that, and slowly, like doing it pretty consistently, and doing project after project, they were like, "Oh shit, Brad actually might be very useful to us."
Sure.
So eventually, yeah, they hired me like full time in like, I don't know, like maybe 2017 or something like that. 2016, I started doing more and more. Um, and yeah, I was like, would help out here a little bit on that disc, a little bit on that disc, and then I was producing, the discs
Hmm.
coming out, and acquiring stuff, and doing that. And before that, I was doing stuff at Wild Eye with Rob,
Hmm.
um, building that brand. I was really into like independent, like schlocky stuff, and so I acquired films for that label. And then some of the films that you see on the Visual Vengeance label that they're doing now, is stuff
Yeah.
I acquired like
Oh,
8
really?
years ago.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. So like, I can see I got them right here. So like, LAH Jabber, Heartland of Darkness, Slaughter Day was a big one for me. I acquired all those films. Acquired a lot of the Todd Sheets films. There's films that still I acquired for Visual Vengeance that aren't out yet.
Hmm.
It was called something else that Rob was trying to start, but things just didn't work out. And I also got a job at Vinegar Syndrome, which was bigger.
Hmm.
And so yeah, I started, just started doing that, and I
Cool.
worked there for up until the end of 20 uh, the right maybe beginning of 2023, like January, February. I
Hmm.
stuck around. I have officially like quit in like 2022, but I stayed on because I had a lot of projects I was finishing out.
Yeah, that
I
makes sense.
didn't want to just leave them. So
Right.
I finished most of them out. I mean, there's films that I acquired for Vinegar Syndrome that aren't even out yet.
Sure.
So yeah, they have. I mean, there's a lot. There's probably like maybe like 30 films that I've acquired for VS that's not out yet.
Hmm.
And then with TerraVision, I met Ryan in 2020, October of 2020. I was on vacation. Well, I was on my anniversary vacation with my wife, and we went to Savannah, Georgia. And I was familiar with the record label of TerraVision and Greyface,
Hmm.
but I had no idea that they were in Savannah. So whenever we're in any different part of the world, my wife always makes sure that we stop at any video store or record store because
I
that's
do
what
that
I
too.
do.
Yeah.
And yeah, we went into Greyface, and I was like, I saw these TerraVision. I was like, why is all these TerraVision records here? And Ryan came up to me. I didn't know who he was, and I was like, holy shit, Spookies. And he was like, oh, you like? I was like, yeah, I'm the one that acquired the movie. I found the rights to this movie, and he was like, oh shit. He's like, you work for Vinegar Syndrome, and I said, yeah. So we kind of hit it off, and we talked for a long time, and then I went to his museum, also in Savannah, that evening, and we started talking more. And that Chloe, his wife, and he was like, "I feel like we should exchange information or something because we're kind of on this same wavelength of like
Hmm.
weird stuff." And then a year later, we released WNUF through the home video side. That was October of 2021. And so yeah, I started doing that, and it was going to focus more on kind of like really, really lowbrow, like shot of video stuff, and like really oddball films that I knew Vinegar Syndrome really wasn't interested in doing. And we started doing a little bit more of that, and at Vinegar Syndrome, things were changing to where I wasn't really vibing with it
Mm.
anymore. And I wanted to do a lot more with movies because, like I said, like I love newer movies, I love black and white movies, I love musicals, I love experimental movies, I love dramas,
Right.
thrillers. I was like, I don't want to be contained of just doing like 70s, 80s, 90s like horror films and like
Hmm.
exploitation films. There's just so much more to cinema. And yeah, Ryan and I talked, and we wanted to kind of build, recreate a video store with our
Oh.
label of just having all this stuff. And there was just a lot of cool things that were on the horizon for TerraVision. And yeah, I was just like, this seems more my speed.
Hmm.
Like I can kind of do what I want. And Ryan and I vibe on the same things and we like the same things. And we're okay with releasing a gritty 60s like exploitation film, but we're also okay with like a 90s love story to
Yeah.
like kids movie to a horror film to a shot on video movie. There's nothing off limits. And that's what I really was like yearning for because like again, sometimes when you're in this, you get pigeonholed as like, oh, it's like a horror thing or whatnot. And it was like, no, there's just more to it. There's so many movies out there, and
Hmm.
why are we ignoring all these things?
And you guys run the gambit too, from like 1911 titles, that Dante's Inferno, black and
Yeah,
white, all the way to 2023. I kind of like that about TerraVision. You never know what way they're going to go, but it's underneath this umbrella, and it's one you can kind of trust.
yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's all very unexpected, and that's the thing is I don't want things to be expected. I kind of like that. I
Yeah.
don't know if customers do, but we enjoy like, you know, we always make a joke. We release movies that no one's asking for, but the reason why is because a lot of these movies are just kind of forgotten about or
Hmm.
ignored, and plus there's a ton of movies that get streaming, or on streaming and never get a physical media release.
Oh yeah.
And
Hmm.
that was bothering me too. It's bothered me for years, still does. And that's
Agreed.
something that we focus on with a lot of, contemporary films. Like some of these movies would never see a home video release, but we, try to give things a chance and, movies that we like. And yeah, everything that's on the TerraVision line is stuff that I was trying to get. Like, for example, Get My Gun and Parasites, both of those movies I tried getting for Wild Eye,
Hmm.
but the deals didn't work out, but when I started working at TerraVision, I approached Chad and I approached Brian again and said, hey, like this is kind of what I'm trying to do. Even something like Chocolate Strawberry Vanilla, that was an old Wild Eye title on DVD,
Hmm.
but I felt like it didn't get a good response because the title's not that great
Yeah.
for Chocolate. I know that's not a good title, but like the movie's really good, and it's one of those things that when people see it, they're like, "Oh shit, this is great!" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, that's what I've been trying to tell you for years and years, even when it was on DVD."
So
So
on each and every acquisition that you get, is there a specific timeline on how long you keep those rights, or does that change from movie to movie? How does that kind of work?
yeah, it's always it's a different it's a different story. It's a case by case basis.
Okay.
So like, with films, we try not to like, so when you acquire a movie, just when you acquire it, I request the license doesn't start when we sign the contract. The license starts from the street date of the movie.
Okay.
But we also give ourselves like we have to release it within like a year or two of
Hmm.
signing the contract. So that way you don't sit on a movie for 10 years,
Right.
because you're able to. I have there's a clause in the contract that, if we don't get it out by a certain time, then, you can take your rights back.
Hmm.
But typically, I mean, people know like this stuff isn't overnight. You could literally work on movies for 5 years to get out. That's just how it is.
Hmm.
And some things are very quick, some things take a while. I've worked with even a couple films at TerraVision where, we had the rights, the filmmaker was already looking into releasing it, So they were like all ready to go.
Sure.
And we signed the movie and we could get the movie out almost immediately.
Hmm.
And there's stuff like Srigala that, I was working on way before I was at TerraVision. I was, researching that, trying to find a home, trying to find the rights to it, and then trying to find elements to it too, because the elements were kind of gone. And that was really rough because that was an Indonesian thing. Um, and it's like, do you guys own Srigala? And they're like, we don't even know what that is anymore. And I was like, well, you guys released this, produced it. So they like had to research, and it's like, oh yeah, we did theatrical on that like 1981.
Hmm.
And it's like, I was like, what happened to it? And they're like, we played it on television like in Indonesia in like 82, and then that's it. And they had to like find the elements to this movie, and I was working on all of that, trying to get them to scan it, and like, hey guys, you should really think about restoring some of your like movies, because
Hmm.
restoration and preservation in other countries is like pretty non-existent sometimes,
Sure.
depending on the country. Like, Russia is really great at restoration. Poland, they're good at preservation, and it depends on kind of where the state is and the government, because a lot of that stuff is funded by the government, so they
Hmm.
have unlimited funds sometimes. Like Russia, they're very good at cataloging, and like nothing gets lost in Russia. It's kind of amazing. Czechoslovakia, kind of the same thing. A lot of those Eastern European countries, they're very
They got
good.
their records intact. Yeah.
Yeah, they're very, very good at keeping a hold of everything. But then you deal with like stuff like in Indonesia and India, like things are just lost.
Hmm.
There's so many lost films in India because they don't have like a system. Like some of their vaults are literally, they're throwing the reels into a room. Like I've
Jeez.
seen pictures, like no joke, where
Yeah.
there's just piles of film that's unraveled sitting on the floor.
So even if you do find what you're looking for, you have no idea what condition that sucker's going to be in.
Yeah, no, that's the bad part. It's
Yeah.
like, and plus they're not stored properly,
Yeah.
so they're probably not even usable to begin with, even if you did find, you know, what you were looking for. And
Right.
so, yeah, a lot of my projects have to deal with like overseas stuff,
Hmm.
and finding, because these films like Srigala, I saw a tape of Srigala when I was like in like 13, 14 years old, no subtitles,
Hmm.
but I always like was drawn to it. And then probably about maybe 6, 7 years ago, I found a subtitled like thing that I could import on my like, I think I had a VHS rip of it because I usually transferred all my tapes to digital. So that way, just in case something would happen.
Hmm.
And I was able to plug those subtitles in. And I'm like, oh my God, I get to watch the movie like for the first time because I've watched it without subtitles for so long. So that was like a huge project for me. That was like 5 years from start to finish.
Hmm.
It's something like, recently we announced In the Woods. That was a movie that, I saw when I was younger, but completely forgot about. And Lynn came to us and he was like, hey, I'm trying to find distribution for my movie. And I was like, well, what's your movie? And he's like, In the Woods. I was like, looked it up and I watched the trailer. I'm like, oh my God, this fucking movie. I love this shit.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I would love to release this. And he was like, cool, let's do it. And literally the contract was signed within 24 hours. And he was already working on a re-release. So he had all this stuff done. So it's like, it was easy.
Those are nice when they come along, huh?
Yeah, American Nightmare was kind of the same way with John. That was a film that I was after, and I tried contacting John. I didn't hear anything,
Hmm.
but Debbie Rashawn's a very good friend of mine, and we worked on Santa Claus together, and we worked on other things before too. And she was like, "Hey, my friend John made this movie called American Nightmare," and I was like, "I fucking love American Nightmare. That's actually one of the movies I want to release." And she's
Hmm.
like, "Well, it's available if you want to do it." And so yeah, we signed it, and they already had the extras done. They shot everything. They
Awesome.
have interviews with like D. Snyder and like all this other crazy shit, and they went
Hmm.
all out. And yeah, I don't think we produced anything for that disc. I think John just had it all. I think we produced the booklet.
Hmm.
That's about it because I wanted to write about American Nightmare. But yeah,
Sure. Talking a little bit more about special features, there are a few discs that I have, in particular ones that I get from Umbrella. Sometimes they take special features from other boutique labels, like they'll take an Arrow Video making of or a Scream Factory something or other. How do the rights work on special features? Do companies just kind of play buddy buddy a lot together, or I don't know how that works?
I mean, some people play buddy buddy, some don't.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it comes down to money, so like it's again, it's a couple different scenarios. Sometimes, like, if we produce an extra, we own the extra.
Yeah.
But sometimes with a filmmaker, they'll produce the movie or produce the disc, and then they will request that the filmmaker owns the extras. So then way you don't have to go through, you can, when you license the movie, it kind of happened with Nail Gun Massacre with Lloyd.
Mm-hmm.
Lloyd owned the film, but he also owned all the extras from the Code Red Blu-ray.
Okay.
So we got all those. But like with the Don May, like when Synapse put out Nail Gun on DVD, like 20 years ago, Don owned those rights. So we went to Don, who's a good buddy of ours. We get along with the Synapse guys pretty well. I just said, "Hey Don, can I have, these extras?" And he was like, "Sure. What do you?" I was like, "I'll give you like $500. It's like a one-time fee, and then we can use them for our release until it goes out of print." He's like, "Cool." And it's literally like a handshake deal and like a PayPal. It's just you want to be respectful. On paying them for their time, which is like, that's pretty minimal. And then some companies, again with Nail Gun, we can say it's 88 Films didn't want to license their Hysteria Continues commentary to us. So I just went to Hysteria Continues to ask them to record it again, and that's how I got around.
There you go.
So that's the only, actually, it's funny with Nail Gun, every extra that's ever been created for that movie is on our disc, aside from that one commentary, but we have one, it's just newer.
Right.
Yeah, it just depends. Like, there's some companies that just won't want to deal with you because they're very protective, or they're just, they don't want it out there because they know that you can't release a complete version unless you kind of have it.
Right.
So there are some companies that don't play buddy buddy, but we already know who those are. So we just don't even sometimes ask, or we do, and it's
if you've tried before, yeah.
Well, they'll ask for like an absorbent amount of money, like
Right.
we want $5,000, and it's like, come on, man, like we can't pay you $5,000 for something.
We're not
like
even
that.
printing that many discs out.
Yeah, it's like, let's talk like $500 or something, So yeah, it depends, but I'm a big on extras, so most of our discs are, a lot of our discs, they're like fully stacked with like, probably 10 hours of extras. Papatopoulos, it's like that, Nail Gun's like that, Copperhead, American Nightmare has a ton, which I didn't produce, but John did a ton of extras. Like most of our discs, it's very rare to find a disc out there that doesn't have a lot of extras on it. I think the one title we don't really have any extras on is Cube. And that's because most of the Japanese actors, they wanted like $10,000 US for interviews.
Wow.
So I just did a very lengthy interview with Vincio Natali, who created Cube, going over his, and like the interview is like 45 minutes, and it's like, that's it. Yeah, I mean, it's rare that something has just like one thing on it. It just depends on the movie too. Like some of the kung fu movies, they don't have a lot of extras because most of those people are gone, and it's really hard to get sometimes out of the country people to do an interview for a movie in the US. Like it's very complicated, So it's very cool when you have like Srigala was a miracle because we had like 4 interviews on that disc, and that's nuts to have something on a lost Indonesian film that's never been released before. But it's just, I mean, some things come together, some things don't.
Right. Well, that's one reason why I love collecting physical media is the special features on the disc, because once you get done watching a movie, you just want to get more and more information on it. At least I do. So just having easy access to all that stuff, it's the best.
Yeah, and I come from a long line of doing that. At Vinegar Syndrome, that was one thing that I I produced most of the discs that came out with the extras. So, those documentaries on those discs and all those interviews, it's stuff that I love to do. The Beastmaster documentary, I think, is like one of the best things I've ever done. Same thing with Six String Samurai. That documentary on there about the making of, I think, is excellent. And yeah, I love telling those stories because those movies inspired me. And now I get to know how they were made, and I think it inspires other people too.
Not only did it inspire you, you were able to make a movie based off of that movie. I mean, that's
That's the
cool
other
thing
thing
to
is
do, too.
working like with people that you really love and respect. Because like the Beastmaster is probably like the biggest thing ever. Because honestly, I acquired the movie, but I wasn't like a huge fan of Beastmaster. I thought it was fine, but I knew it was a good movie. I love Don Cascarelli. Phantasm changed my life. And it's like, oh yeah, that would be a cool movie. I remember that being on television all the time. Let's go ahead and do that. So I brought that to Vinegar. So we're like, oh yeah, that would be a great title. So I reached out, found, got the rights, and then, we start, we scan the film. The restoration starts. I reach out to Don. I'm like, hey, let's do, extras. And he's like, I don't really like Beastmaster. And I was like, what? I was like, you don't like your own movie? And so he like told me the story, and I was like, I walked him through what I was trying to do and what I was going to do. And he trusted me with what I wanted to do.
That's cool to hear.
Like what I was kind of giving him the freedom to do, like also like supervise and make sure no one's telling any like absurd stories or whatnot. And so, yeah, I mean, in Beastmaster, we have everybody that was alive pretty much in that documentary that worked on that movie.
Nice.
That had like bigger names. I mean, everybody from the costume designer like Betty Madden, who's done some great work in the costume world in Hollywood. Mark Shostrom, who did some of the special effects. We had the guy's son that made the sword. He passed away, but his son still makes Beastmaster replica stores sword for his store. Like we interviewed him, so it was like a huge group of people. And like, the last one was like Mark Singer that we got. Even Tanya Roberts, she passed away like, I don't know, like just a few weeks after we did her interview. But yeah, Mark Singer was like a really, really like stand-up guy. And yeah, I mean, we did the edit on Beastmaster. I sent it to Dawn. Dawn loved it. And yeah, he wrote me this email. I should frame it or something, because it was like I got this email from him like out of the blue. And he was like, it was probably like a few weeks after we were done. And he wrote me this email saying, I wanted to thank you you changed my mind on Beastmaster. I have like a new appreciation for it. I think you did a really good job. And I was like, oh man, that's crazy. Like Don Cascarelli writing to me saying I did something cool. So yeah, it was a big deal. And yeah, I mean, every time we do extras and stuff like that, there's always kind of those types of stories of filmmakers really like, I never really thought about the movie like that before. Like, that's really cool. And you change people's minds. Because honestly, like, I think the biggest question that I always get whenever I start, reaching out to people or doing extras, you reach out to somebody and like, hey, were you in, Razor Blade, the movie in 1987? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, hey, we're re-releasing that. Would you like to do an interview? And they're like, what the fuck are you really re-releasing that movie for?
Yeah.
It's typically the same thing as like, oh wow, that's the movie. And they'll try to say, I've done this movie, I've done that movie. And I'm like, I don't give a shit about those.
We're talking about this one. Yeah.
So yeah, it's like you can kind of change people's perspectives on it, which I would say 90% of the time it's great. And the other 10% is usually bad.
Sure.
There's always that you always have to deal with some asshole or something, or someone wants to do an interview, but they're like giving you a hard time about it, or they're like, sure, I'll do it, and they just like they have nothing to say, and you set up all this stuff, and it just
just wasted time. Yeah.
You're like, man, what the why the fuck did you even agree to do this? You don't even give a shit about the movie. Like, why are we even here?
Mm-hmm. But
But
honestly,
yeah,
that's not a bad ratio.
well, then
90-10,
you'll see, then you'll see like maybe them like 2 minutes in the documentary because they were assholes through the whole entire process.
right.
Anyways,
Okay, so we talked a little bit about the special feature side. Very glad we did. I kind of want to talk a little bit about the restoration side as well. I know you guys have put out a couple 4Ks. Are there any big decisions that go into releasing a movie on 4K as opposed to Blu-ray?
I mean, sometimes the restorations are in 4K, so the option to do it is there.
Yeah.
And typically we'll always take it if it's there.
Okay.
But like we would like to do most things in UHD. However, sometimes it gets complicated because you'll scan the movie, you'll do the restoration, you'll do your color correction,
Mm-hmm.
you get the file done, and it's like, okay, you can do 4K, but then you don't have HDR on it. And I personally think it's kind of pointless to do a UHD without HDR.
Sure.
Kino.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. I just find it unnecessary. But sometimes, in their defense, and I would just put it to Blu-ray. I just wouldn't even bother with a UHD.
Mm-hmm.
Is that your director or director of photography doesn't want to go back and do everything again because it's a completely different scenario.
Sure.
When you do HDR, like you're going back, like it feels like you're starting over. So there's been a couple instances recently where it's like, where we did the restoration and it's like, oh my God, this is perfect. What if we did HDR? And they're like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to go back into the studio. I don't want to have to, we try to make it easy as possible. But some people are more control freaks than, other people who are like, oh yeah, sure, go ahead. And you send like a 30-second clip and they're like, that looks good.
Mm-hmm.
Or even people that go into the studio and supervise the whole restoration, which we've done before too. So, yeah, I mean, if the option, we always ask if the option's there. So our first UHD was Malum. When we acquired Malum, I just asked, I said, what'd you guys shoot in, what you master? And they said, we've mastered in 4K. I said, perfect. I was like, have you done HDR? And they're like, no. And I was like, well, let's do that.
Mm-hmm.
We'll pay for it. So we went ahead and we did the HDR on Malum and we were able to do UHD. When the screening starts, that was another UHD we had. And I talked to Connor and I'm like, hey, what did you guys master? And he's like, we mastered in 2K. And I was like, oh, okay. I was like, why didn't you master in 4K? And they're like, oh, it was to cut down on time. And I said, oh, okay. He's like, but I think my lab still has the movie.
Okay.
And I said, okay. I was like, if they still have the movie, like they have, because once you master something in 2K, you're done. You can't go back unless you have your original files.
Sure. Is there a big
they had all
price
the
difference
originals.
in between 2K and 4K mastering?
Huh?
Is there a big price difference in between 2K and 4K mastering?
Oh, it's huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like triple.
Okay.
And we're already talking like $20,000 here.
Sure.
So, when the streaming starts, his lab still had the files. So the 4K was kind of easy for them. And he was already working with them. So the HDR process, he was able to go in and supervise the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
So those two movies were able to do on UHD. However, Malum did pretty well. But when the streaming starts, didn't really do all that well, in sales.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, okay, can we afford to do Because it's like, you don't want to beg people to buy stuff, but at the same time, it like I always present it as kind of like, let's say you have your favorite band of all time, and they have 12 albums, and you love 11 of the 12.
Mm-hmm.
You're probably going to pick up that 12th album that's not very good just to support them.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like the same thing with when labels do UHDs. You know, if you want more UHDs, you got to buy the UHDs that they release,
Sure.
because that's only going to give them the momentum to do more, and the inspiration, and also, oh, if this does well, we can do more. So
Right.
again, when people are like, just a Blu-ray, it's probably because you didn't buy the other 10 UHDs that they released.
Mm-hmm.
That's just how it is, because you're talking about, sometimes 3-4 times the cost.
Yeah.
And there's much more to UHD. You have to pay a license for UHD to Sony. You also have to pay per disc manufactured.
Oh, geez.
So you don't have to do that with Blu-ray.
Okay.
You don't have to pay for a license. You just make the Blu-ray and you distribute it. But
Mm-hmm.
when you do UHD, you got to pay a UHD license yearly, and then you also have to pay per unit that you make.
Man.
And then the HDR alone is like, sometimes could be $5,000 to $10,000 on top of the restoration, and then scanning is what matters. You can scan in 2K, you can scan in 4K,
Mm-hmm.
and 4K is a lot more expensive than scanning in 2K, because it also depends on your scanners. So it's like, certain scanners only scan in 4K,
Hmm.
and if you're going to do it and you're going to do it once, you might as well do it in 4K.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like it's always a different scenario for every film. So yeah, like we have certain things that, like the jar was scanned in 4K, but we didn't do UHD on it.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why we didn't do UHD and HDR on it is because the movie was notoriously known for being shit. And the movie's wonderful and it's great and it looks beautiful and it's got great reviews, and people have kind of reassessed it and they're like, oh shit,
Mm-hmm.
this movie's actually really good. This, the original cut or that they did on tape, that's what sucks, not the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, okay, well, hindsight, maybe we could have done UHD on it, but could we have, would it have been successful?
Right.
Because
the cost,
the price tag would have been higher, and
right.
would more people give it a chance? Because
Mm-hmm.
that's the thing, is like, if you look at our prices, like our Blu-rays we had a race $26.99, and our UHDs are $32.99.
Yeah.
And that's just for standard packaging. When you get into more packaging, you got to add more money to it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, if you package a UHD and you want to do something sometimes really nice, you got to charge $50-$60 for it.
Yeah.
And like the money that people are making back, like I think a lot of people think, oh, these companies make a lot of money because they sold 5,000 units of something. Yeah, it's probably a lot of money on that movie, but we also have these titles that really don't move.
Mm-hmm.
And the cost to put something out doesn't change. Like it's usually between $12,000 to $20,000 just to get a Blu-ray out the door.
Sure.
And you got to factor in selling that for $26.99. Look how long it takes you to actually get to the positive.
Mm-hmm.
Not alone over the overhead where it gets, in the positive. And sometimes we do splits with our filmmakers,
right,
to where they get half of something.
And right now you're having like sales on your website, so it's just
and like the sales is great, and that's, again, a lot of we didn't talk about that, but that sale that we're having right now, like the stuff's on sale, and we're doing free shipping after a threshold.
Yeah,
we're eating shit on the movie and eating shit on shipping.
That international shipping, man, I don't know how you're doing that. That stuff can get crazy.
I mean, it's just to get, we know people want to buy stuff, and it's rough on shipping costs, so let's try to help people out, and hopefully they see that and they'll help us out in the future by continuing to support us.
Mm-hmm.
Because literally it's not like, there are a couple companies that they have made this like a lucrative business, and it is a business and it's still positive, but every title that you release, man, it's expensive. And
Right.
yeah, the bigger that you go and the more that you do, like something like Nail Gun, that was probably our most expensive release, that we've done, with between the restoration and the color grade and HDR and then all the extras, like that was up there. I don't know, $50,000 to put out that fucking schlocky ass movie that we love, and then yeah, it's like people are like, movie shit, and it's like cool.
That shit was glistening, wasn't it?
I was like, it looks good though, so yeah, it's like it's a rough business, and and we kind of bring it on ourselves. We understand because we don't want to release, we love it to death, but why do you want to release Return of the Living Dead again? It'll sell,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the other thing is we know those things will sell because people love to rebuy shit all the fucking time,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, not that we'll never not re-release something. I'm not saying that, but it will be very few.
Right.
But we're just more interested in bringing movies to light that people just don't know.
Mm-hmm.
That's fun for us, and hopefully it becomes, it worked for me at Vinegar Syndrome, but Vinegar Syndrome's been around for over 10 years, so they're established.
Sure.
It's like a new business, and new business really isn't profitable in its first 2 years. People say, it's hard to make a turn a profit. So, you have to build trust. You have to have people understand your brand, where you're coming from. Is it curated? Because that's the other thing is so many people have so many questions, and we're out there telling the stories, like our live streams and whatnot. That what we do, it's literally just myself, Ryan, and his wife, and Earl, who does the art. That's it. We hire a bunch of other people to do things, but the people behind Vinegar Syndrome or TerraVision is literally just us. Like it's it, and we make all the decisions ourselves, and
But that's why, as a collector, I like to do a lot. I like to collect a lot of boutique labels, just because that they're putting a lot of love and care into this stuff.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I do the same thing. I mean, I buy stuff from companies that I'm not very familiar with just to support them because I know how rough it could be.
Right.
Is that most boutique labels, they struggle to do what they're doing. Very few make like so much overhead that it's good for them.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Most of it is a struggle.
Mm-hmm. Well, you guys are a little mom and pop team, but you had one of your releases in Walmart, that Malum. How did that come about? When I saw that, I actually saw one of those in stores, and I about shit myself. I'm like, why is there a TerraVision title at Walmart? I thought it was so cool.
Yeah, that was a big deal, just to kind of honestly pump our chest a little bit, because there's not boutique labels really in Walmart. Rarely.
There's like Shout, Scream. That's about it.
Yeah, I think Shout Factory has some, and there's some like DVD. I mean, Wild Eye was in Walmart with their DVDs, but it was that was just a lot of favors from people that I knew and friends that I really wanted to like kind of make a statement, and I figured that was one of the best ways to go. It wasn't easy. It was very difficult to make it happen, but luckily, like I said, we have some really good friends and a good team like that helps us get that stuff out there, especially like, Cineverse was really, really helpful in that sense of getting it done. Which goes to like Brad Miska and like Brandon Hill and all those guys, Dan, which all those names don't matter to people because they don't know who they are. But yeah, it's like they really fought for us to have like a title like that, and it was Malum was incredibly successful at Walmart.
That's good to hear.
I think we pressed like 7,200 copies of it, which was kind of a big deal at the time. And yeah, we now we have the next one should be in August or September.
Oh, that's exciting.
They did a second one, so. Yeah, the more we do, probably the more they'll accept and kind of take chances on us. The people that run the home video side of Walmart are very into home video and very excited, like in big genre fans. So they're kind of pushing for it. And plus with, Movie Stop no longer existing and Best Buy not carrying physical media and Target on the verge of like not
they're gonna
carrying
stop at the end of this year.
Yeah, they are. Walmart's like really trying to step up and take charge of it, even though GameStop now, I guess, started carrying movies again, which I know it's not Movie Stop because Hastings owns Movie Stop. I don't even know if there's Hastings around anymore.
Not ours closed like a decade ago. Yeah.
Yeah, like I know they got bought out, but I don't even know where there's a fucking Hastings.
Yeah.
Yeah, so GameStop, apparently I have to stop by my GameStop to see if they're carrying any movies. But yeah, it was a good experience, and it felt really good to do something that soon in our first year
Right.
of being solo, I guess you could say, because we were a partner label with OCN for a little while.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, it was like, within a year we're able to have the film accepted and in the stores, which is also big for the filmmakers, because you're hitting a completely different audience when you're in Walmart. You're hitting people that don't buy like stuff like we buy.
They're just walking by and you got to grab it.
Yeah, they literally walk by and they pick something up to pick it up, because there are those people that just buy physical media that don't collect or stuff. And then, but you also have the people that collect, but they're not in the boutique realm, so they don't know what's what. They'll pick up and be like, I found this movie Malum, I have no idea. And they're like, what is this piece of paper that says Creep Coin? But it's cool because you're hitting an audience, and hopefully some of those people cross over and buy more. But it's also just important for the filmmakers to get their movie out there, and people that have never seen it, give it a shot.
Correct. Absolutely agree. I can't wait to see what your other title is going to be in August. I'm assuming that it's going to be put in August just to kind of go with the horror theme, just so hopefully it sells out by Halloween. Was that kind of the strategy there?
No, that's all up to Walmart.
Yeah.
That's the only thing, is they call the shots for everything.
Sure.
They're really easy to work with, but it's like they have certain time frames. And yeah, I think it's going to be more September, but it was going to originally be August. And we're also trying to put Malum back into Walmart for October.
Okay.
But that hasn't really been confirmed, but we are trying. Sure. And Walmart, I think, is into it too. It's just they don't work that far ahead.
Sure.
They literally only work so it's May, June, July, August. They only work like a month and a half ahead. They don't work past that.
Gotcha.
Kind of have like a window of like 45 days. If you don't get that, then it's the next 45 days.
Yeah, to be a company that big, that's kind of crazy that they work in those tiny chunks. You'd think they'd be like a couple years out in advance.
Nope. No. I think it's because home video is things are constantly coming in, and movies are released every single week, so they have a different format for it. And maybe they do have that for bigger studios. Maybe they do that with like Fox and Disney, but not with us.
Sure.
Yeah. We're a very, very tiny speck of dust.
Right.
But they gave us a chance, which is cool.
Yeah.
So.
No, absolutely. And I can't wait to see what is going into that store next. But I know we talked about a little bit about the OCN stuff, and then you guys kind of went away. The main thing that kind of made me like actually go to your website is when you guys did the promotion for the 13 weeks of Halloween. Loved that so much. I'm a huge sucker for like a sale event and just seeing, okay, what's coming next. Are you guys planning on doing that annually?
Well, to call ourselves out, that failed the 13 weeks on.
Oh, really? Why is that?
Well, we weren't able to complete the 13 weeks because we were so behind in manufacturing that we were making people mad that we kept announcing stuff, but nothing was being shipped. So when we very first started, Ryan and I are that's the other reason why Ryan and I match so well, is that Ryan and I both work like 18 hours a day. Like it's in our blood.
Yeah.
So that's why we mesh well together. When we got into the home video stuff, we kind of expected everybody to like work at our pace. So we were announcing stuff and it wasn't like sent to authoring yet, because we were like, oh, that will be quick. They just, the QC, and then it's like, oh, this one problem popped up, this file doesn't play. there's video dropout at 22 seconds. What's wrong with your file? And it's like, when you go back, you have to like start all over again. And so we got into a point where that was a great idea for 13 weeks of
Oh
Halloween.
yeah.
We were falling behind every week, and we were getting death threats. We were getting
Oh,
hate mail.
Jesus
Like, it was
Christ.
crazy. So we're just like, all right, we're just not going to announce anymore, and we're going to wait. And yeah, I mean, to be fair, we announced the jar in October, but it didn't really ship until like fucking, January or February. So yeah, it was like the pre-orders were way too long. Our replicator kind of got backed up because they couldn't handle all the stuff that we were giving them. So we kind of pumped the brakes a little bit, and we wanted to make sure everything was done, that we announced in 2023 before we announced anything in 2024. And with 2024, we were only going to announce things that were on their way to us, so that way we knew that it was just literally shipping issues you had to worry about.
Sure.
We didn't have to worry about QC or authoring or anything like that. So anything that we announce now is literally on its way to us, and it's like maybe 2 to 4 weeks before it's actually in-house and we prepare it and ship it out. It's just because we fell into that trap of announcing stuff, and it just and we did it for a little bit, but we just eventually had to stop because we were getting behind and we were overwhelmed and we were scared, and we were afraid we were going to lose customers or the trust of people, because you pre-order something and I ordered that 6 months ago. It's kind of ridiculous. So yeah, we pumped the brakes on that. However, for October, we are planning on something. The idea, if it pans out, is that we announce everything that comes out in October, we announce in September, and then we'll ship the end of September, first week of October, for you had to have everything for October and Halloween.
Gotcha.
So that's kind of the idea. And it's like a whole slew of like titles, like a huge, like, if we can pull it off, it'd be cool to do 13 of them. But I mean, it's there. It's just like, it takes so much time and effort for each movie that it's really rough. I mean, there's so many hours that go into each disc. And when you don't really have a huge team working behind it, and really it's just me half the time, because Ryan runs his other 18 businesses that he owns, and he has record labels, and he does a lot. He has multiple stores and a couple museums, and he's always doing some other stuff. So I kind of oversee every aspect from start to finish on each disc. So it takes a lot of time, a lot of nights, a lot of early mornings, sometimes 18 hours, 12 hours straight of nothing but just fucking taking phone calls and sitting on restorations and supervising stuff and QCing. It's a whole mess of things. I do miss kind of having like only focusing on like one or two things like I used to. But now I'm like, I oversee from, seeking out to the movie, to doing the deal, to writing the contract, to getting material, shipping material, scanning material, restoration, color, like authoring special features, like getting the disc ready and prepared. And
then you just multiply that by the amount of movies that you actually have coming out. Like that's
yeah. And each time you do a movie, that process happens like 3 or 4 times in the QC part. So, to QC a disc, sometimes it could take like a week, which is a long time when you break it down. Like just a day matters, in this business. So yeah, it can get it's not glamorous like some people think. It's actually very stressful.
Well, you got to be dedicated to the craft. Like, you got to really love doing what you do.
Yeah, and I do love certain aspects of what I do, and there's just certain things that I absolutely hate. So
no, totally get that. When I was doing a little bit of research, I also saw that you guys have a couple like retail stores. What's the record label? Grave Face, is that what it is?
Yeah, Grave Face Records. So yes, there's Grave Face Records, which is the OG store in the Starland district in Savannah. And then Ryan next to that has a store for home video, which has a bunch of different labels, and you can go buy movies and records in there, mainly like horror soundtracks and stuff. And then there's an arcade attached to it
Very
too.
cool.
And then at the Savannah Mall, and an old, I think it's Abercrombie and Fitch maybe store that Ryan bought out, has the arcade and records and movies and stuff like that. And then there's a store in the museum that's on the river, which he has. And then there's a store in Chicago, Gray
Yeah,
Face.
that's what I found.
But there's also a rental store there. We have like
Oh, really?
10,000 movies you can rent.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, we opened up a rental store. So basically, what it is Odd Obsession was the big video store in Chicago for years, years and years and years. And it closed down during the pandemic, and the owner didn't want to open back up because he was afraid he was moving on to different things. So we're friends with them, and Ryan said, well, what if we just get the stock and reopen the store in a way? So it's still Odd Obsession, but it's like, the Gray Face. I think honestly, most of the stuff says Odd Obsession. We didn't really change anything because it was like a huge thing in Chicago.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can go and you can pay like a monthly fee and rent as many movies as you want. It does fine, but it's hard to promote, because it's like it only does well in Chicago. I mean, obviously, there's people aren't like, oh wow, rental store. They live in Virginia. They can't participate. So it's just people in Chicago. So that's cool. And yeah, we're always looking for different things.
Yeah.
So Ryan has his own clothing company, Never Not Goth, it's called. He has the museums, of course. Gray Face Records, which is an indie label, because that's also a record label for indie bands. There's like 100 bands on the fucking label or something. That's been around for 22 years. And then TerraVision Records has been around for 14. Since 2014. So close to 10 years.
I don't live, or I guess not too far away is about like a 7.5 hour drive from Chicago. So next time I'm there, definitely hit the retail store. That's
Chicago's great. I love Chicago, but the store is pretty cool. It's small, but you can see, the museum. That's where the John Wayne Gacy stuff is. So like John Wayne Gacy brain is in there. We have his brain on display.
Oh shit! Wow.
Yeah, like a lot of people don't know that about TerraVision is that Ryan has he has I think all remaining I forget how many 200 paintings from John Wayne Gacy that are authentic. He has that. I mean, in the museum, he has James Jones glasses that they had. He has the Flavor Aid packets, the real Flavor Aid packets that was used in the Mastodon side.
Wow.
He's acquired some crazy stuff, and it's at the museums. Between the two museums.
Is there one in Chicago, in Savannah and Chicago?
Yeah, it's in both. Yeah, he splits them up. I mean, mainly the Chicago stuff for Gacy because Gacy killed in Chicago.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just all types of things. Like illegal taxidermy that was done centuries prior, and shrunken heads, and freak show stuff. He owns the largest freak show collection in the world.
Wow.
Yeah, Ryan's crazy, dude. So that's the reason why I do all the home video stuff, because he's
juggling a lot of other stuff.
Yeah, he just hustles. The dude doesn't sleep, and he's always doing something. So that's why it's a good working relationship, because he trusts me, and he just knows that I'm doing stuff.
Sure.
And we talk probably 3 times a day just to kind of tell each, touch base. But it's more or less like a friend thing. It's not really like a boss, So yeah, we have a great working relationship, and Chloe's wonderful. Keeps Ryan in line. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a great freedom to have. And now that I know that all this true crime stuff is in Chicago, my wife's going to be on board. She's a huge true crime nut. So yeah,
dude, it's crazy. The stuff Ryan has, it's crazy. They have a huge warning before you go into because people will go in and be like, hey, when you come in here, this shit's real.
Yeah.
It's a real dead body. That's not a fake. Nothing in here that's the thing, is nothing's fake in the museum. Nothing.
Yeah, no.
They have the original Heaven's Gate VCR that was used in their Suicide.
Oh my
The
god!
real VCR with all
Right.
the original tapes and stuff, and it's playing as you go in. But yeah,
Wow.
it's nuts,
Yeah.
man. Yeah, Ryan. He has got a lot of rare and very, very unique, one of a kind things.
Well, very
So
cool. This just went from like a trip to Chicago where I sneak away for a day for us to be like, no, we're staying at this store the whole day. Kids can go with the grandparents. It's fine. Yeah.
oh yeah, I mean it's on Milwaukee. It's in like like Lincoln, not Lincoln Park, Lincoln Square,
Hmm.
kind of around that area, and it's just like it's. I mean, Chicago's fucking beautiful.
Yes, it is.
It's
Hmm.
it's great. So I like going for the food.
Can't go wrong. Yeah. Got to stop at
But yeah,
Portillo's every time. Yeah.
yeah, I helped build that store in Chicago and
Hmm.
with shelving and I mean, we should have made a documentary about the video store because that
Yeah.
was a huge undertaking
I bet. Hmm.
to get that stuff. Because like the thing is, he had they stowed away everything like in a basement in
Hmm.
Chicago, and we went in there and that stuff was in there for a couple years, and the amount of stuff that we had to clean up and oh, like
I
I
can
had to
only
burn my
imagine.
clothes after I got out of there. It was nasty. I
Woof.
mean, rats and whatnot. That's the thing is we had to save all the movies. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that was destroyed,
Hmm.
but I mean, the majority of it was saved. But yeah, like I would lift up like a pack of DVDs and liquid would run down. It would be like rat piss, and I'd be
Oh,
like,
Jesus. Nope.
"Gotta be fucking kidding me!"
That's when
You
you take
know?
5, man. Yeah.
Yeah, it was rough. But yeah, we saved a lot of those. I mean, all those movies were just going to be destroyed.
Right.
They were just going to sit there and rot, and we just didn't. I mean, it's part of the preservation process, and there's a lot of rare DVDs that were in there,
Nice.
VHS tapes, and I mean, yeah. And I went through and I curated the sections.
Hmm.
Like we'd be like, all right, this movie, let's put that out. This
Yeah.
movie, let's sell that. We don't need the Marvel movies here. Let's focus more on these like,
Absolutely.
old Criterion DVDs and old Asian stuff that's like
Yep.
really rare,
Yep.
really, really rare. So yeah, it was a fun time. It was a great time. It was just it took, several months, several
Yeah.
trips to Chicago to do.
Well, there we go. I think that's a good place to end it. We just did a full 360 there, starting off with rental stores, and now you're starting to curate
Yeah,
a rental store for a
yeah,
new generation. Yeah.
yeah. So if you're in the area, do it. Stop by.
Yep. No, yeah. I'm not joking. That is definitely going to be on the stop next time I go to Chicago. Very excited to do that.
Yeah.
Well, before we kind of head out of here, is there anything you want to plug TerraVision wise?
No, I mean just go to the site. We're having a sale right now, international shipping if you meet a threshold. Records, cassettes, VHS, Blu-rays, UHDs, it's all there, and we're constantly promoting it. So just thanks for having us on. That's all.
Yeah, no, thanks for coming on. I had a blast talking with you. And yeah, you gave a lot of insight into like the ins and outs of what it takes to actually make a release possible. So yeah, I was very informed on this. So yeah, thank you for
No,
coming.
no, I'm glad I said something of value.
Well, very good, man. This has been episode number 31 of Boutique Talk. Thanks for watching and listening. And until next time, I'll see
Thank
you.
you.